Hello everybody, Anthony is here, and today I want to show how I sculpted this particular city block. It has a lot of variable architectural styles in it, so let's go check it out and see how it was done in this time lapse. I've also used a lot of alphas from textures.com, and you can download 15 free alphas from there per day. I spent a lot of time picking the right alphas, going through all of them. Spent like honestly a couple hours, so you can see the whole list of links of to those textures, to those particular materials in the description. So, like in my previous videos, I did have an original blockout which I really quickly created using the blob tool, and I really don't have the recording of how I made it. So, but kind of it was more of an inspirational sketch in the beginning, and then what I'm doing here now, it's a lot more detailing, trying to bring a lot more sense to it, because this one was done maybe, I don't know, in like 20-30 minutes, and now I spent a couple hours on top, probably even more, I think maybe like 3 or 4 hours on top of real time, right? This is a sped up of 4x. Um, to make it a bit faster, but yeah, I'll spend about 4 hours of real time to sketch it out to make it a bit more understandable. And what I wanted to do, I also wanted to divide this into chunks, so this will be like a left side and a right side. So that will be kind of like a kit um, for me to use later, and also kind of so it's not too much too overwhelming. So I can just deal with one part at one time and the second part the second time. Also, when you divide it like that, you force yourself into this kind of slightly different thinking of different proportions, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to that to affect my kind of brain concepting brain on how to evaluate this sketch and how to treat it and treat it differently than if it were to be a one big part. So now I'm just using some blob tools to fill up the gaps to build the walls. And what I like to do is, like, you can see the blob tool brush is set to a certain radius, so that radius is the thickness of the wall. And I like to have the real thickness of the wall. And I would imagine this would be like 20 centimeters thick, or maybe actually less, since it's kind of like a slummy building and a hot climate. So it's probably only it can be as thin as 1 centimeter. It can be just, yeah, like half a centimeter for like a wooden plank. But if I know it's kind of like thin like that, if I build in the thickness, when I use the brushes, when I do some destructions, also the thin walls, they behave differently. They behave more like real materials. That's what I liked. And it's really easy to create some holes, to punch through the walls and destroy it and make it look more abandoned and more derelict, essentially. More slimy, right? So I made a little billboard in front. And maybe in the future we'll go back and texture the buildings. For now, the idea is just to get the sketches out and just to train myself to do this type of designs. I don't like train, but more like practice. Everyday practice, doing something new, trying to invent something that's. I haven't really seen people doing that, right? And I feel like I have a little an edge here because I lived in Asia for a long time, so kind of have a visceral feel of how it should look, and it's all really quite different to the Western countries or say Eastern countries or Latin America. So they all have their own particular type of construction habits. You can see here I have the shadows on, so I have ability to control the negative space and shadows in real-time shadows inside 3D Code are pretty cool. Inside the 3D Code viewport, I would say the rendering inside 3D Code is pretty crap, but real-time viewport is quite nice. Also, I didn't really like about ZBrush, which like in ZBrush, it's a bit fake, and the stuff that you see in ZBrush, you don't really see, say, in a render in Maya, Unreal, anywhere, because ZBrush tends to show you more details, while in 3D Code, it's a bit more true to the point. You can use those matcap materials that are really almost identical to ZBrush, but I try not to use them too much because again, I think they give me a bit of a feel, a bit of a fake sense of details. So here you can see I'm using different stencils, trying to figure out what type of kind of windows, what kind of a grill I want to have on the windows. So I was pretty happy with this one. This one was really quite a type of a definitive style that influenced the whole block. Again, it was done on no, on the fly without any like preparation, thinking about it that much. But when I was looking at these windows, I realized it looked more like, say, a building made in like 80s, more of this concrete type brutalism architecture. And again, if in Asia, they have a lot of that mixture of buildings made in the 70s, and then you have the overlay. Maybe that particular building block was a thriving building block in 1970s or 1980s, but then the development moved to another city area. Um, and say so a lot of that in Taipei, right? So they have some areas which are kind of pretty run down now, and they have a new areas that are looking nice and brand new. So I imagine this be. I try to create a story in my head. I kind of do it almost on like intuitively at this point, but it's not. It's worth thinking through it anyway. So I think about it as this is the building that was built in that style of 1970s. It doesn't have to be. I build in a kind of imaginative place, but so that was built say 1970s in that style, and then it went out of use. Maybe there was a economy downturn, maybe everybody started to work from home and they moved out, right? And then squatters took over. They started to also enhance the building and started to build their own stuff on the sides left and right. And eventually we kind of have the history of the building that has a layered history, and you can actually, if you notice that all my buildings, they actually don't have any windows. Like I didn't use the actual glass windows. I didn't use any glass. It is possible. It's not actually that hard. I can create a window, and I just if I assign it a different material, then if I just drop it say to Unreal and I have two materials per building, that material with the glass can be turned into the glass in a Unreal. I just decided to make it a bit simpler, and I like the play of shadows, so I decided just to keep it all without any glass, at least for now. So here you can see I will use the pose tool to modify the proportions of the windows. I thought that would be kind of cool just to tweak it around a little bit, tweak the proportions, make it like less the same, and makes windows taller, and that I really quite like the look. So again, I'm using some stencils to detail the roof. And you can see a kind of slab stuff on top of itself. It's not perfectly like separated this stuff. So I apply one stencil, then I apply another stencil on top. If it starts to look too ugly, I will start then go and start to clean it up. It also adds a bit of history when you if you go through multiple iterations of different stencils. And honestly, I was a little bit lazy. I decided not to divide this building in multiple buildings. I did that before. I did that in my bigger tutorial where I really go into detail about each chapter. I go into detail of each tool in each chapter. So there I break everything down, so I have more separation. Say I know that there is a wooden part that I have on one layer, I have a billboard on another layer, I have like plaster on another layer, I have trees, cables, lamps, everything separated by the layer, so that makes it it's much easier to texture later, because obviously if you have this overlay in elements like I'm having right now, it will be pretty hard to texture, and I know it will be hard to texture, and I still went with this style. I was like, I just wanted to get it done, and I felt like if I had too many layers, I would be a little bit constricted in designing, because I'll be like just always thinking of which layer I should be using right now instead of just going free form designing. And the thing is, like with voxels, you can always fix the sketch on the fly. Um, so here you can see I actually did a separate layer for the planks because I needed to deform them separately, and I had no choice but to do that. And then I'm using different move brushes to start, to show that these planks were kind of maybe picked up from the on the street. They were a little bit cracked and broken, and I use this brush that gives pretty realistic wooden damage to the planks. Here you can see that stuff went through. So what I'm using here, I'm using blob tool just to kind of hide those windows. I didn't spend too much time doing the back of this city block. I did spend some time in different other buildings where I did spend. But I wanted to make the back of the building look good. It's more about I was getting lazy and I didn't want to spend so much time doing everything. So here I'm doing a bit of cleanup. So you can see I had that original sketch pretty much like 20 minutes before or 10 minutes ago when I started recording, and now I just demolished everything, and now we have just the structures, new structures, and I'm trying to come up with the grill. I didn't like that I started to build this overlay of the facade, but it became a bit too busy in my sense, so I will remove those kind of that cage in a second. You can see here I'm playing with the proportions quite freely of the whole building. I can always, go then and modify stuff. Again, I do this play with the proportions because I had that feel that I had this just boring rows of buildings. They were all the same height, and I wanted to play around uh, with the height of different blocks. So here I'm using the close tool and I'm running it, trying to drop some. Maybe it's a plastic wrap on top. Right now it's pretty low quality. Um, and the close tool is really quite simple. You get the plane hanging in the air. You just press the button, and it drops. You push it while it's dropping. You can use the mouse to push it around, the stylus, whatever you use, and then you get that piece of cloth on top of building. And uh, um, then I kind of was trying to stretch it and see how it looks, and then I will add more. I will add more division so it doesn't look that pixelated. I mean, it doesn't look that low poly. So okay, yep, I've decided to add a new one as well, and you can see here I'm playing with the proportions of the cloth. So I made it kind of more rectangular, so it'll drop and be size of the roof. It didn't look realistic, right? Because you don't get that many wrinkles on that big of a cloth, so I decided to scale it down and make it tiny. Again, maybe if I played around a lot with settings of the cloth, it would have been possible to make the clothes that would cover the whole roof and look good, but I really didn't want to do it. I wanted to do stuff quickly and not bother with those details really. All right, so dropping this again, and no, it's flying a bit slow. And while it is flying, I will try to move it. So now I can move it, and it will still simulate it. It's kind of penetrating the mesh and dropping by, but it looks pretty realistic. So I am all right with this result. And I just increase the resolution, smooth it a little bit, so it's not so polygonal on the look. And you can see I have a little bit of an artifact that's happening like across the model. Just something that can be that a 3D code can generate. And right now I'm kind of ignoring it and just doing my thing. Here I think I jumped a little bit, so I started to paint the trees, and you can still see the artifact which is in the background. I'm using one of the like grow brushes to and with the dot alpha to grow these trees. To be honest, I constantly play it with different brushes to see which one is going to perform better. But often it is a combination. Like I have to create some mesh using the cow brush, and then I will use the grow brush to essentially grow this. You can see here I had like a little balcony, and I didn't like that the balcony was hiding a human person there, so I wanted to make it so this stuff is visible. I mean, the balcony is a bit more visible. And then the garage creates a lot of this kind of hanging elements, so I was using the voxel hide to cut out some of those elements. And using the sphere tool to just to start and paint the cables. The roof is kind of simple. Like, there's always some kind of stuff that would drop down and left over the roof. Cables, ropes, barrels, radio equipment, television equipment, construction debris. So I'm trying with the sphere tool. I'm trying not to hit another kind of pillar because then the sphere tool will jump across and hit all the pillars and columns. So I did a little bit of like welded elements to the fence using the blob tool. Using field to make some of these patterns, to break some of those patterns harshness. So here I'm just more like looking and the whole thing and trying to analyze it and think what can I do. Sometimes I have some creativity, inspiration. The stuff comes out pretty easy. Other times I have to really like force myself and think about it, and I just have to think what can you place on the wall. And this kind of the reason this project has been like, kind of in the works for a really long time, including the modular design tutorial, design city. Overall, this has been almost 2 years now. A lot of stuff happened in the 3D code itself that allowed me to kind of carry on and create more. It gave me more motivation. Like now, it's easier to have like huge like, poly counts in the scene, like to like 300 million triangles. And I jumped to another building, and I just drawn some planks. One plank, then another plank. And now I just want to kind of destroy it a little bit using the voxel hide and just lasso tool, just breaking this down. So it's also the part of the old sketch right now. So on the left side, and I'm trying to think. So I still want to use the parts of my old sketch, so it has a bit of that chaotic, some of the chaotic elements which I want to keep and kind of grow on rather than try to delete everything and build everything. Here we jumped a little bit, so I used the stencil of the squares to create a pattern, so outside like facade. And right now I created this pattern, but also I need to create some kind of holding structure because those plates in the background they're actually kind of hanging in the air. So I've duplicated it, and I'm now using a stencil to create this holding parts. And I'm playing around with the angle and see maybe a different angle is kind of cool. I decided to keep it pretty straight and vertical. And now just doing the stencil on the back of the back wall, playing around with different stencils and just trying to find the one I like. I'm mixing a couple of stencils together. And using the blob tool just to add some kind of detail around outside. Using the move tool to see if there is any point in trying to skew the whole thing and maybe like make it older and create damage. It didn't look too bad, so I decided to keep to make a little bit of damage. You can see here, so I can paint through the whole wall and create holes. And here, quite like how it melts the metal and create that like rusty pattern. Obviously, we do have like floating elements if I made it melted too much. I'm trying to apply this one big alpha chunk and see how it looks. And I'm trying to kind of fix it using the fill brush so the damage is not that sharp and uniform. And trying to create a more variable surface on the left. So on the left surface is like some kind of plaster with some kind of meshing of some kind of some fabric. And I'm trying to use this with the move tool. I'm trying to make more of like a plank. Pretty cool effect here. It's like one part is melting, but the background layer was showing through. So here I'm just playing around. So I'm destroying it, but then I want to plug the hole, and I'm using on plane tool. So I'm like trying to find a position to put the on plane and then fill it with the blob tool. Here, this kind of frontal planes looked too brand new, so I decided to start to go and destroy it using the airbrush and move tool as well. I'm kind of bending stuff as well. Really quite fun and easy to remove stuff. So I'm breaking down those decorative panels. And by the way, you can see that there was a floating artifact before. It was created from the cloth. The floating artifact is now disappeared, probably because I turned the mesh into voxels and turned it back, so that can kill the artifact if you have some kind of funny floating issues. So I really like how this move brush kind of creates this leaking type of a pattern. It's like a really rich pattern. It's quite common in some rustic structures, in rusty structures, in rusty metal. Oh, there was some kind of dirt pouring down, I don't know, something like really nasty, like sewers. If you look at photos of the sewers, they will have those leakage and layers of slime. So that could have been like slime coming down from another wall and creating those kind of leaking patterns. Just evaluating the sketch again, trying to see what can I do next or what should I do next. So I decided to paint some debris using the wax clay brush. And I isolated the layer with the planks, and I decided to paint some debris here as well. Playing around with different alphas and evaluating the sketch again, trying to figure out what else to do. You can see what the original one, this is the new one. So I decided to create a new wall out of using the old sketch. So I duplicated that old sketch and just moved it across because I thought that this wall was a bit boring to look at, and I didn't want to spend too much time detailing it. So this is one of those kind of rare cases where I did duplicate the whole structure and decided to reuse a lot of stuff that I had before. So duplicated a couple times and then combined it, and now I'm trying to uh, create supports for some floating elements. Just brings a bit more sense to the whole thing. I do like it being pretty chaotic and hectic. You can even think about it as it could have been a part of the building that got demolished. So now we have that history there. There was a building, but it's just now a trace of that building. Trying to cut to create a door. Some of the surfaces were too thick, like that, like hanging material was looking like way too thick. So I decided to start to thin it out. And maybe even I just removed it. Looks like I removed the whole thing. Reusing some trees, duplicating that, moving it up and down. And again, just trying to see what else can I add. And 3D has a somewhat decent tree generator, but I prefer to paint the trees myself because it's just a bit quicker than dealing with the generator. So you'll see me alternating between the grow brush and airbrush. I'm always trying to figure out. First of all, quite often I forget what they do, and I have to remind myself how they differ, and then I'll use them and try them and see how they create the trees. Trying to grow it. And here I used the stencil to create a bit more interesting tree pattern. Kind of didn't really work out, but I did use a stencil and a voxel height to create more detail for the trees. That actually helped. Right, moving this around. So I decided to free up the balcony and push the trees down a little bit. And creating some holes and cutting through the walls, which I don't know, is really quite a nice bit there, the way it got cut. So the wall was way too thick, so the cuts didn't look realistic. So I decided to thin the wall out using the voxel height from the top. You can see here the stencil kind of went across and hit everything, including those metallic supports. So I thought that looked weird and decided to modify it and use the voxel height to clean the surface. And I used the voxel height using it with on plane, so it didn't go and penetrate the whole thing. It only penetrated for a little bit to clean the surface, like reusing and painting the trees now. So trying to use the stencil to paint something. I was more like testing how it looks. And now I used cow brush and I kind of use the rectangular tool to just cut through the whole thing. We're using some planks for the top of the building. And those planks come from the bottom, and the bottom planks, they used to be really wide. So now I squished them and started to reuse at the top as well. So I'm doing a bit of a cleanup on the original sketch. And here, what I realized later on that I did a bit of a mistake, that I cleaned up the sketch too much and lost some of the chaotic details that I enjoyed and I had to bring them back later. You can see here I'm playing around with the density of the cloth. The thing is that it's a super thin mesh, and 3D Code doesn't really like thin meshes that to be turned in voxels. That creates this, you can see, kind of bending artifact. So I had to pretty much use the fill tool to fill up some issues with the cloth. Now I thought about, oh, I probably could put some kind of aircon unit, something like that on top. and you need power supplies for those cables. So I'm trying to find a good diameter for the cable, and I'll paint it around. And now I'm actually painting the kind of the roots of the trees. And I'm using this stencils to kind of create some grills on the aircon units, so they look pretty good. And again, it's going to be obviously if I go really up close, it will not look any good. But from a distance, it's good enough. Using the blob tool to add more detailing, like a panel. Here I'm trying to fix that flow, no, that rusted panel being like way too many floating parts. So I'm trying to identify the on plane and then use the blob tool to create the back wall. I created some support so it doesn't look like it's floating in the air. Doing some cleanup work. Creating walls for that side. Again, pretty thin walls. Some planks. And I lost 3 gold right there. And that's the problem with the blob tool. Sometimes if you put on plane on one side and start to create a blob from a different side, it can create like a 10 million triangle mesh or bigger. I talked to the developers about that issue and they were improving on it. And I think in the latest version of 3 code, and we're talking about like 3 code 2023, maybe version 20, um, like subversion 20, they improved on it so it's much harder to kill 3D code by creating a random huge mesh. And there's a lot of work done with 3D code. 3D code developers are doing a lot. In a small crew, they implement a lot of changes. They don't have much of bureaucracy or overhead, so they do implement a lot of new features on like on a weekly basis. Even though a lot of bugs, well, what can we do? Pretty big, complicated software. I know what I'm saying is like it's good to update 3D code every now and then, like well, every now and then, I mean, it's worth updating it even every month sometimes, or every couple months. Create supports here for the buildings. Filling some gaps, cleaning stuff up. Trying to fix the cable, which is kind of hanging in the air. And trying to add more thickness to this cable. The thing is, like the surfaces are really thin. So what can happen if I turn it to the surface and revoxelize it again? The cables will disappear because they're too thin. Because what happens once you turn it into surface and try to turn it back from surface to voxel, everything will get a bit more smooth, and there is just no way to avoid it. So quite wary about little details that can disappear if it gets decimated on the export, or just gets disappeared during turning it from surface to voxels. So right now I'm trying to, because I had on different layers I had cables and such. So right now I want to split this all up, and I want to have the left building and the right building. So I have to make sure that um, everything in the left just belongs to the left building. So now introducing a bit more damage. So as usual, if there's too much damage, I will then use some fill brush, something else, just to fix that. And fixing it creates history, so it's good. Creating some fences. Not even a fence, but it's like a little barrier at the top of on the top of the roof. Again, a lot of blob tool, creating panels upon panels. Again, a bit of a cleanup to make sure. So now I applied a different material to the building. So um, I want to combine everything into just one sketch. And if you have different colored material, it's easier to understand what's belongs to that part and what's not belong to that part. So I'm just going and really just shift, drag up to combine the mesh into one big voxel piece. And I do it for this guy, and then I will be doing it for the right guy as well. Here, I'm actually not sure what I'm doing here. Think I like this structure, and I want to just to have it and expand on it. And since there was like just one big giant mesh, I had to pretty much go and cut everything out. So yeah, scale those planks just to create some kind of bottom at the bottom. And you can see I'm pretty loose about using the posing tool, so to modify and change proportions. Don't want to feel too constricted. And that's really about it. In my bigger tutorial module Town Design in 3D Code, I explain how I use all the tools in detail by chapters. It's all broken down, and also cover how I texture it. So if you're curious about it, go check it out. The link is in the top and in the description. And thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one. If you have extra questions, please join the 3D Code Discord. The link is, well, right here or in the description, because if you have some questions, it's better to ask it there. Usually people know more about technical stuff in 3D code than me, actually.